This is the Clutch Picks Betting Podcast presented by ClutchPoints, powered by DraftKings. Like, follow, and subscribe, rate us, review us, all that other fun stuff. It is Thanksgiving week, and I am fired up. My name is Sheldon Alexander, and I'm joined by Matt Russell, sports betting professional and creator of The Window. Available on Substack and wherever you get your podcast. As mentioned, Matt, it is Thanksgiving, which, you know, to football fans means one thing and one thing only, and that is some football on Thursday. Lots of football all day long. How are you doing, my friend?
Good. We got to get there, man. You know, you referenced the Substack. The Thanksgiving Football Spectacular is out there. It's the 1 week a year where instead of having to have, be locked in on one Thursday game, which, as you know, have gone incredibly well this season, you need to be locked in on 4 games to get everybody the content so that they have that ready to rock and roll for this week. So now we get to talk about the rest of the games, and I'm just as interested to find out who plays on Sunday as you are this week, because I can tell you everything you need to know about some of these Thanksgiving games, but man, here on a Wednesday to try to talk about some Sunday football, hell, like I'm gonna be asking you more questions than you're gonna be asking me.
I mean, I'm excited because, as mentioned, the Thursday football action Thanksgiving is so great because it becomes like its own mini week. The Thursday and Friday, obviously,
It's
4
different.
games. It does hit different. It's a beautiful thing. I'm super excited for it, but I also think the problem that I always have, and we'll get there, obviously, is that Lions game. No matter if the Lions are good or bad, I'm always just like, by the time kickoff happens, it's not kickoff, but by the time it's like 12:30, 12:45, 1 o'clock, I'm always like, damn it, why did I make this pick?
Yeah, it's like an international game.
Yeah, I go from so excited to just like, what am I doing right now? But the one thing you did mention, and we'll get to, is the Thursday record. I tried to tell, so I put out a pod promo every week for the podcast, and I was trying to tell people, I'm like, I don't know if y'all have been paying attention or not. We've just been giving out winners every single Thursday. I mean, if this is week 13, out of the 12 weeks, I wouldn't be surprised if the record on the pod could be like 10-2 or something. Right? It gets like, it's high up there. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, every Thursday, just handing out winners. I probably should just go back and look at the record of the picks that we made, because we normally come to a conclusion. Like, I feel like it's been rare where we've disagreed on it. Either you've convinced me or we're on the same page. Do you know what I mean?
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, because I know there was the 1 week where the Giants beat the Eagles. I didn't have a side or the total in that game. I'm just going to tease the Eagles down, and like, that's, unfortunately it's kind of a cop out, but like, that's kind of the only thing that I thought was valuable. And of course the Giants won that game, but from a side or total perspective over at the window, like on our Thursday night betting preview, we have not lost a side or a total other than that one game, which of course was a teaser. So, I don't know if there are games in there where I wasn't able to talk you out of it or into my pick, but like, yeah. And so the way the gambler's mind works, or at least my betting mind works, is it's such a tough thing, because from like a marketing perspective, like you're sort of saying, as far as the promo is concerned, like, you want to shout it from the rooftops and just be like, yo guys, like, we have not lost a Thursday side all season long. But of course, when you get super chesty and loud about it, you know what's going to happen next, right? Gambler is going to come in and be like, yo, I don't think so, man. Like, you need to pump the brakes. And so I certainly wasn't going to do it ahead of last week, where I had the Texans money line outright. And there's been a couple of those this season too, where the money line ends up hitting on a Thursday night as well. There's been a handful of upsets on Thursday night. And so the thing is, the whole time I just wanted to get to Thanksgiving, because I'm like, I don't expect to go 3-0 on Thanksgiving, right? The streak, if you will, is going to get blown up on Thanksgiving. I just want to get to Thanksgiving so that it can the streak can get buried in like a proper way with a proper meal, and so on and so forth. So here we are. We're probably going to lose one of these games come Thursday / Black Friday. But you know what, Shell? I don't really think that we get this far as winning all of the games, going into week 3 on Thursday Night Football. So maybe we do, man. Maybe we just sweep the board. Why not us, right?
Ironically enough, I feel like one of the games that I wasn't convinced to switch to was the Niners when they outright won against the Rams. Like, I feel like that was a game where I was like, I'm on the Rams.
That might have been.
But I want my Niners to win so bad. But no, I can't do it. I'm on the Rams. And then meanwhile, I'm watching the game like, dude, let's go. Like, cheering so hard.
Right.
But that's why we love the NFL.
No, that could be.
For the folks that might be new here to what we do, I give a pick to each and every game on the sched, and then Matt comes in. We're talking market ratings, team values right there, where the information and education on where the line was, where it is, where it could be heading into kickoff. I then try to come out on the other side with a much more informed pick. Try to play the role of the viewer. Sometimes Matt convinces me to change my pick, and other times I foolishly don't listen, but that's the joke. That's the bit. That's the show, as I like to say. Now, if we get to the housekeeping, last week, 7-5-2 against the spread, which I will gladly take. I will note that normally the double-digit spreads, I will normally lean towards taking said spreads, taking the points, and instead I laid all the points last week on those double-digit spreads. All 3 of those double-digit spreads did not cover, right?
Yeah.
Including, I think it was the Ravens they covered by 13, and it was, it was 13, but the spread was 13 and a half. So just,
that's right.
We're okay though. I'm okay. I like coming out of these weeks where you're like, all right, dipping and dodging, still winning more than you lose. I'll take that. 90, 85-3, still not where I want to be, but on the plus side. And hey, I want to be on the plus side at the end of the day. But of course, enough of me just rambling here. Let's get to the particulars. Why the people are here. That is Thanksgiving football. I can't promise you turkey, but I can promise you some picks. We start with the Green Bay Packers in Detroit, taking on the Lions. The Lions are favored by 2.5 points. The Lions, hey, they win in OT versus the Giants last week. And I should have posted a clip from the pod last week where we discussed, why don't they just dump the ball off to Jahmyr Gibbs and just give him the ball? And I feel like he had like 3 or 4 just crazy plays where he's running free for 30 yards last game. It's like, why don't you guys just do this more?
That's right.
Like, I could be your offensive coordinator. There's a kid at Madden right now that could just be like, hey, here's some plays, run these plays. Anyways, they got the dub, but I'm really nervous here, Matt, because as I mentioned, I feel like no matter what side I'm on here, I'm always kicking myself about this Lions 12 p.m. Thanksgiving game when they were good, when they were bad, when Matthew Stafford was starting, when who was their backup that always ended up starting a couple of those games. It was a really trash dude that had a couple games. Anyways,
he started like 5 different teams. It was like, he's playing again. Like, how does he keep getting involved in our lives?
My point though here is I look at this game. The Packers rolled last week. The Lions played a lot of defensive snaps last week on a Sunday. Now you're on a short week and it's noon.
Yeah.
There's part of me that thinks, should I be on the Packers? But I just like the Lions at home in this instance. I just think the Lions are better. Again, I think the Lions are more self-inflicted mistakes, whereas the Packers just might not be as good as we want them to be. I'm on the Lions here, -2.5, but I'm not very confident on it.
Yeah, I love how I said, like, hey, I can tell you everything you need to know about these Thursday games. And then we're going to lead with the first game. And I'm going to be like, yeah, I don't really know. What I do know is that +3 or a 3-point spread was too much. And so that was the line, the look ahead line. And that is also where it opened. And I sort of have a theory with regards to this line, that because the Packers had kind of a trickier game in theory against the Vikings last week, and that everybody thought the Lions were going to hammer the Giants. Like you and I, you mentioned kind of laying all the big points, right? I don't know that you can beat yourself up about that game because, it was -10 when we spoke on Wednesday. And then by the time sort of Saturday rolled around, that line was up to -13. And it's like, yeah, if you had told me like I was being asked to lay 13 points, like I'd probably take 13 with Jameis, but we've kind of like gone too far down the road with getting the CLV from the Lions at -10. Of course, then the Giants go into this bag of tricks that nobody thought they had because we just just went through Brian Daboll, watching him play Sunday and Monday and Thursday night football games, going like, there's got to be something creative that the Giants can do to mask their largely god-awful offense. And of course, there ended up being that after Brian Daboll left. And so, again, I think that the market was sort of expecting the Lions to show out in a big way last week, and therefore make -3 kind of make more sense, because it never really made any sense. These two teams, since basically the start of the season, or let's at least say like a couple of weeks in, have kind of really mirrored each other as far as, you mentioned, like, the Lions have done maybe more to kind of shoot themselves in the foot, and maybe the Packers just, aren't really all that great. I'm at a point in the season, and we've talked about this with regards to like the buttoned up teams. If you're shooting yourself in the foot, like, I'm no longer using that as an excuse for you to like maybe get it figured out, right? I'm like, you just do that, right? If you're, and it's, coaching, infrastructure, all of that sort of thing. And I'm not saying that the Lions are necessarily that team that's going to consistently shoot themselves in the foot. It's more just like, if that's now in your repertoire, I'm kind of like low key out on that. And so when that +3 came up on Sunday night and through Monday, I believe, I was like, you know what? I don't believe this line should be this. These two teams are basically the same. If you want to bump the Lions up to a 2-point home field advantage because it's Thanksgiving, I guess, though historically, like, these home teams, listen, most of the time these home teams are the Lions and the Cowboys. So, they often lose whether they're favored or not on Thanksgiving. But like, it's not necessarily a good thing to be at home for Thanksgiving, right? Like, there's a lot of distractions. There's a lot kind of going on for these teams. And so, like, yeah, if you're going to give the Lions 2 points for home field advantage, I'm still not at 2.5 unless you're trying to convince me that the Lions are like definitively better than the Packers. And as much as you and I have been skeptical about the Packers throughout this season and going like, when exactly have they done the thing that we've wanted them to do as far as like covering a point spread and this, that, or whatever, the Lions are kind of right there, right? Where they were this close to losing that game to the Giants, at which point now you've lost back-to-back home games to the Vikings and JJ McCarthy and the Giants. And it's like, that is way worse than maybe not way. I guess the fact that there'd be two of them
letting Jameis
would be worse than what the Packers did.
Letting Jameis catch touchdown passes and like dance on you too. I was like, yo, what is going on? That's like the play of the year.
Right. That's right. And so I just kind of look at it like, okay, I want +3 with this. Now that we're down to 2.5, again, I go back to kind of not really having anything for you in that department. Though you do know, right? Once we hit 2.5, another thing starts to kind of become deployable here, that being the potential teaser leg. So you might have a little teaser leg with your turkey leg on Sunday. If you think that these two teams that have largely kind of been identical, I mean, even right down to some of the weird stuff that's happened, both of them with like top, 5, 6, 7 tight ends, both going down around, within like a week of each other. And of course, when the Packers acquire Micah Parsons, now it's Micah Parsons and Aiden Hutchinson, who could be on the poster for this game instead of the quarterbacks. You can get into the quarterbacks and Jordan Love and Jared Goff, like kind of looking like each other as far as just being like drop back. Like if you pressure them, things kind of get a little dicey because neither of them are all that mobile. Again, a little bit, Jordan Love a little bit more so. And so, yeah, like, I don't know, maybe this game just comes down to, can Jahmyr Gibbs get loose for that one extra play? But, there's some pretty significant injuries on the Lions offensive line that make me sort of wonder if that has to come via the pass game instead of the ease of just handing the ball to Gibbs like last week, where you go, well, the Lions, pretty banged up on the offensive line last week. They're also going against the Giants rush defense that is among the worst in the NFL. And so, it's a tricky one. I can definitely sort of understand the idea, like, all right, getting Lions underneath a field goal here. Maybe everybody kind of overreacting to that game against the Giants. I kind of get that too. All I can tell you is what I did. And so I've already grabbed the +3 with the Packers. I don't really even see that coming back. So I can't even really give you anything when it comes to that. But, as another quick plug to the Thanksgiving Football Spectacular, Thursday, I should say, it is all about like different prop bets, player props, right? We sort of treat it honestly like it's the Super Bowl. Instead of one game, you get a days full of just prop bet after prop bet after prop bet and different things like that. So not, again, not killing myself because I don't have some definitive side in this game.
Yeah, no, totally get it. And my thing here is I'm sticking with the Lions here just because it's a shade under 3. I'll take that at 3. I'd start to really lean Packers here, but right now I still have the Lions rated as better than the Packers slightly, but we'll see how that plays out. And yeah, as I said, my record with this game year after year, take that for what it's worth.
Yeah, we got London, Brazil, Spain, Germany, Detroit. Exactly. All of them, basically locations into, in and of themselves.
All also destinations on my vacation wish list. But story for another day.
There you go.
We move on to the Dallas Cowboys, who are hosting the Kansas City Chiefs. Chiefs favored by 3.5 points on the road, and the Chiefs season is still alive as they came through with an overtime victory. They were down 20-9 at the start of the fourth quarter, but Mahomes came through with the comeback, or maybe their defense held up, and that was the key to the comeback. I don't think they allowed a first down in the fourth quarter or overtime against that Colts offense, but either way, a week after us discussing the fact that, well, last year they had all these crazy comebacks and won all these one-score games, and then this year they haven't done it yet, and then boom, they finally do it, of course. I'm on the Chiefs here. I'm laying the 3.5 points on the road, and this more comes down to the Cowboys, right? Because I feel like the Cowboys, they, their offense, what more can we say about their offense, right? From the start of the year, you were bang on about Dak Prescott playing and them being just a high-powered, well-oiled machine. 21-point comeback last week. Offense was dope. I just feel like the Chiefs defense has more for Dallas's offense in this scenario. And I think the Chiefs are just in go mode. Like, this is go time. We're seeing Mahomes trying to scramble, put his shoulder down, get in the end zone. Like, they know this is go time. All the Andy Reid trick plays got to come out at this point. They're ready to go. They got to win these games. And the Cowboys, I still don't believe I don't want to fully call this a weight class game because I don't think the Chiefs are at the pinnacle of where we believe the Chiefs to be. Do you know what I mean? Or where we think they are, or they should be. Yeah. But this is almost a weight class game for me. Like, I don't think the Cowboys are in the same level. So I'm going to lay to 3.5 points, even though it's 3.5 points on the road against a high powered offense that makes it very easy to backdoor cover spreads. I get all that, but I'm rolling with Mahomes and Andy Reid here. Give me the 3.5 points. I'm trusting Spags to come up with something to slow down Dak Prescott and company. Slow them down.
Yeah, no, for sure. And listen, you can find a 3 relatively cheaply, right, in that sort of minus 115 area out there. So feel free, again, as always, everybody, shop around, make sure you have multiple outs, all of that sort of thing. Sunday's game was interesting in that it was sort of infuriating for those of us who were on the Chiefs, even at -3, right? You mentioned those 2 pushes. I imagine one of those was just on this game. And because we expect the Chiefs, part of what the Chiefs, what makes the Chiefs and why they have that had that great record in one-score games, and why they've just been themselves for the last 5 years, is that, like, they are, again, using the phrase, right, buttoned up, right? Like, you don't see them kind of screwing things up, and people get frustrated as they're trying to hope for the downfall of the Chiefs when, like, a penalty call goes their way, right, and the Chiefs get all the calls, and, like, certainly I can fall into that as well. And then this past week against the Colts, everything that the Chiefs kind of never do, they do. And that's how they got down. Like, it really wasn't anything that the Colts did necessarily outside of just the individual plays that were getting made as part of this, right? So, like, Patrick Mahomes, throws in an interception, but it really is a nice play by the Colts defender. But it's a thing that, like, Mahomes throws that pass pretty accurately most of the time, right? Just kind of flips it over the lineman, and it's not a big deal at all. And it's, probably ends up being actually a pretty decent sized play to start the game. But instead, the Colts get the ball inside the 5 and have like a 3-yard drive for a touchdown. Later in the game, the only real drive that the Colts had was when Ashton Doolin is catching a 45-yard catch and run on 3rd and 1, which, of course, as any offense would, you're expecting Jonathan Taylor there, and then you get Ashton Doolin, right? So you sort of, all right, fool me once, shame on you. Meanwhile, you got a sort of a phantom-esque face mask penalty on a Travis Kelce touchdown. Kareem Hunt has like 1,300 career carries in the NFL. Yeah. Before his fumble on Sunday, you want to know how many times Kareem Hunt had fumbled the football in 1,300 plus, I believe it is, around 1,500 carries.
2.
He's fumbled it one time before, and it was his rookie year.
Damn.
With the Chiefs, back before a lot of stuff happened between how he got himself back to the Chiefs. And so, again, you're sitting there as somebody who's bet on the Chiefs going like, we're getting Patrick Mahomes interceptions and Kelsey's, touchdowns are getting called back. And there was also, we're not even talking about Tony Romo calling an offensive pass interference the worst call that he's seen all year and being pretty damn right about it. And then you get Kareem Hunt fumbling the ball like inside the 10-yard line. And you're just kind of like, what is going on here? And yet the Chiefs come all the way back, force overtime, and win the game by 3. And so, like, if you told me that game having closed -4, you'd have to bet that, the next time around, like, I would do it again and again and again. And so, you might say that's kind of besmirching the good name of the Colts. I still think they're a really good team. But I think the Chiefs are better. I think the Chiefs, outside of maybe the Rams, are still the best team in the league. And I don't really care what the record says. But I am going to need them to play a little bit tighter here. And so the other element to all of this, again, the fumble is one thing and the penalty isn't. I think both those things are, easily cleaned up. But the red zone offense, right? It's been a thing for basically the last year and a half. It's why the games were even really all that close last year, is that the Chiefs, for whatever reason, can't get the ball into the end zone at a rate that you would expect. Luckily for them, the Cowboys, and again, you can tell me that the Cowboys defense has completely changed over the last 2 games in 7 days there last week, where they won both those games out of the bye, all the guys that they have back, all of that stuff is true. But fundamentally, inside their own red zone, they are one of the worst teams at keeping the other team out of the end zone. And so this week, I think the Chiefs are going to be able to score once they get into the red zone. I think they are going to do fine against the Cowboys' zone defense. I mean, look at it this way. The Eagles game planned to throw against the Cowboys last week. The first drive was, again, you always talk about the script, right? The first 15 plays. The first drive for Jalen Hurts and the Eagles was pass, run, pass. And then the second drive, where they also scored a touchdown, included 9 more passes. Like, the Eagles sometimes don't even throw that many times, and they did so in the first 2 drives against the Cowboys. And so that was an incredible comeback. This also sort of brings up the idea, like, how can the Cowboys handle success? Because they win that game comfortably against the Raiders, and then they play okay in the first half, but shoot themselves in the foot in ways that the Chiefs can't even dream of, right? It was unbelievable. And I'm on the Cowboys in that game going like, I'm going to come to, the podcast on Tuesday on my own show and be like, did you guys see that? Like, the Cowboys should have won that game. And they end up winning that game, which is actually the most surprising part of all. And so can the Cowboys, first of all, like, do you expect them to be just buttoned up all of a sudden because they made that comeback against the Eagles? I don't. Do you think that they can handle success after 2 wins in a week? I don't. I think this is the scenario where, again, you're not going to get the Chiefs kind of, phoning one in. They know that they let way more points than they should have come, off the scoreboard last week. And, I think that they can move the ball. I don't think they're just going to sit there and run Kareem Hunt right into Quinnen Williams all day long. I mean, it's going to be a Patrick Mahomes game. This is going to be one of those deals where it's, Mahomes and Kelsey just housing turkey legs from, with, who was it, Tracy Wolfson after the game, right? Just Wolfson handing out turkey legs to those guys. So, but we'll see.
Oh yeah, it'll be a ratings bonanza for sure. We'll be getting the headline about how many people watch this game, and it'll set a ratings record and all that fun stuff. And T Swizzle will be there somewhere in one of the boxes, and Post Malone at halftime. Like, there's a lot going on here. This is just a show. This is like the NFL at its best, and Patrick Mahomes will be at his best. I agree as well, because my fantasy team needs it. As we move on, and I switch off of topics that people don't care about, my fantasy team, we'll move on to the third game on Thanksgiving, which is also a pretty decent game. The Ravens are hosting the Bengals. Ravens at home and favored by 7 points. Joe Burrow is back from injury. Jamar Chase is back from spitting suspension. That was a tongue twister I didn't mean. But they're also getting 7 points here. And to me, the interesting part, as I'm taking said 7 points with the Bengals, for the record, you look at the sched and you think, even if the Bengals win out, they end up at 9-8 yet again, right? So it's just hilarious on that point. It's like Joe Burrow's back. He's back just in time. But on the flip side here, the Ravens won last week against the Jets, but I know what the score was. The score looked like it was easy, but like Lamar looked kind of shaky in that game. The offense didn't look good enough for me to even like feel comfortable in the fact that I laid 13.5 points with them last week. Like it just wasn't that smooth on offense for them. So coming back around this week against a highly motivated Bengals team, a highly motivated Bengals offense, 7 points I can't lay with the Ravens here. I will say though, the only thing that makes me nervous is our age-old theory of the Ravens primetime matchups. Somehow they're always ready and geared up for these primetime matchups. But I need to see it first because I know they say Lamar's healthy, but he doesn't look like Lamar, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I don't even know if anybody's even saying Lamar's healthy at this point, right? Like you got to a point in the season. Well, first and foremost, let's talk about this for 1 second, or just like we buried the lead on this. These 3 games, and then I will even throw, especially if you throw in just the fact that I think they're both 8-3, the 4 games for this Thanksgiving / Black Friday are by far the best group of games that we've ever had for this holiday. Like again, you mentioned like the random quarterbacks that somehow like permeate these games, and it's like Colt McCoy is somehow involved. And the various Lions guys that get thrown into the mix. Yeah. Is it Blau? Yeah, Mr. Blau. That name again is David Blau. And so somehow like, and of course it looked when Burrow went down, it's like, oh God, like that's gonna ruin Thanksgiving for that game. And like who knows what's gonna happen with some of these other teams. And then all of a sudden we get here and like, oh wait, all the dudes are here, right? It's like Goff's here, Love's here, Mahomes, Prescott, Burrow, Jackson, like all these guys are here. And of course, all the the Bears and the Eagles are largely healthy as well. And so, but the funny thing is that we almost got tripped up. We almost stubbed our toe, if you will, with the Joe Burrow situation. But apparently now Lamar Jackson is the one who's got a bit of a toe injury to go along with the hamstring pull that took him out for a month. And even just going back to that, right, as they're watching the Ravens, or he's watching the Ravens lose game after game after game, there was an element of just like, well, Lamar, like we need this guy back here. And then Tyler Huntley comes in for like one more game and gets a win against the Bears. And, I think part of that was that Lamar Jackson can't play on that Sunday game and then play a Thursday game, which was against the Dolphins. And so they're like, all right, let's give him this so that he's not playing these 2 games close together. And then since then, basically every week, it's been no practice for Lamar on Wednesday, no practice for Lamar, or very minimal practice for Lamar on Thursday. Oh, he's, practiced in full on Friday and good to go. And now he has to play that short week type of game. And so instead of just not practicing on Wednesday and maybe not practicing on Thursday, it's like, oh no, he's playing a football game. And so a lot of it is just indicative in watching him out there, right? You don't have the explosiveness. You don't have even really trying to be. I think he had 11 yards on 7 carries last week, somehow dropping a yards per carry rate that since he's come back was basically like, I think 3.5, something like that. Right. And so like, yeah, you mentioned like Lamar and prime time and all that stuff. And it's like, yeah, man, he's terrifying at prime time. Not this version of Lamar. And so like, yeah, man, like we have to factor in like current situation. And the current situation is that Lamar Jackson is just handing it off to Derrick Henry and just largely kind of a drop back passer. And so the Ravens have been able to win all these games. Jets, Browns, kind of barely, right? Like needing a Mark Andrews fake tush push scenario to get the game-winning touchdown there, the leading touchdown there. And then you go back, Dolphins and some of these other teams that they play, Vikings, etc. And so it's just like, yeah, this isn't that Ravens team. And so, I always, as kind of revert back to like, all right, well, what does the market think of these 2 teams? And so, the Bengals have been all over the place, right? They've been like rock bottom going into that game against the Packers, right? When they signed Joe Flacco off the street, and then we watch it and we're like, you know what? They're actually not terrible with Joe Flacco. So it like has to be moved up a little bit. And then of course, last week, there's rumors that Burrow's maybe going to play and it comes close, but not quite. Meanwhile, Jamar Chase is out. And so that moves it around. T Higgins out for this one. Not all that, ideal. But listen, if you had to lose one of the 3, between Higgins, Chase, and Burrow. Sorry, T. Like, enjoy your week off. Like, yeah, that's the guy that we're going to sort of be content with missing. And so the Bengals came into this season being rated as an above average team, right? Like 9.5 was their win total. So the expectation is either 9 or 10 wins. They still might get to 9 if they go on a heater here. And you mentioned, right, like if they win out, if they also win out, that means they've just handed two losses to the Ravens, because they have, and I think that's kind of one of the reasons why Burrow is back when he is, because it's, we talked about this with regard to the Steelers, but the Steelers, I think, are going to kind of knock themselves out. Mm-hmm. The Bengals can handle, two more. What is it? What are we looking at here? That would put 7 losses. If you just said, okay, Bengals win these 2 games, 7 losses to the Ravens.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden the Ravens are looking a little dicey with games against New England and Green Bay still on tap. Mm-hmm. So and 2 games against Pittsburgh, by the way. So who knows, right? The point is there's still a lot to kind of be played here, and the Ravens are compromised. And so it's less about the fact that Burrow has, and the Bengals rating with Burrow has been restored back to its original place, because it hasn't. Yeah. Part of that is Burrow's going to be a little rusty in theory. Part of that is because he doesn't have T. Higgins. But to me, it's still looking at the Ravens ranking and going like, as long as you're going to keep putting them in that like mid to high 60s range, which has them as 13.5-point favorites against the Jets and has them as 7-point favorites in this game, that in the look ahead, market before the season, before any of these injuries happened, was 5.5. I don't know that I don't see why it's not, again, just back to 5.5. Or again, if you're looking into the sort of compromised ability of Jackson and his legs, to even be a little bit lower than that. And so I kind of think like the number probably should be around like 3.5 or 4 in this game. So yeah, like that's a long way to just kind of go and say, yeah, man, I agree with you. But like, that's kind of how it all plays out for me, from a rating perspective here. And I'm looking forward to it, man. I can't wait to see what Burrow does.
Yeah, you make such a great point about just the level of these games. There's always a stinker in there somehow, or there's a bunch of stinkers, or one team's really, really good, one team's really, really bad. But we're even getting the Cowboys coming in riding high. Yeah, right. There's always a
butt fumble happened on Thanksgiving night. People forget that, but that was a Thanksgiving special.
That's a good call. That's a good call. But yeah, the fun doesn't end there for our extravaganza here midweek, or I guess weekdays. Black Friday, we got the Chicago Bears, who are in Philadelphia to take on the Eagles. The Eagles are laying 7 points, and this after, as mentioned, they blew a 7-point lead, after they blew a 21-point lead to the Dallas Cowboys. That game flipped on, like, just, I don't understand. You're up 21 points. Normally that means we'll just give the ball to Saquon. We can kill some clock. Everything should be cool. They got nothing. Yeah. Then watching that game, I was reminded of, I don't know if you caught, probably not, but the ESPN pregame show. I don't really watch many of the pregame shows, but it's on my TV as I was leaving the house and ready to go to work. And they were doing a segment just carving the Eagles offensive coordinator. And I don't know if I've ever seen like a mainstream broadcast like this just openly carve a play caller and just call his playbook so elementary. And they're showing plays and saying like, how are you running these plays in the NFL? Like, this makes, like, I was sitting there just stunned. And Alex Smith, who like rarely ever says anything, was talking about how he talks to his son's like 7-year-old flag football team and breaks down, these are the type of things you do versus a zone. These are the type of things you do versus man-to-man. And he's like, I feel like I need to have this conversation with the Eagles. And I'm watching this like, what is happening right now? Because they never go that ham on anyone, right? And then the game plays out the way that it does. And I'm like, oh, so I guess maybe it is that bad. Interesting. So as I take that going into this game, as you can tell by the thing on the screen here, it says I'm laying the 7 points for the Eagles, right? I'm laying the 7 points. This is more about the Bears. The reason this is more about the Bears, they keep winning. They won last week against the Steelers. Cool. They're 8-3 somehow. They keep finding ways to win. But then when you look into who they've been beating, and I see Mason Rudolph, JJ McCarthy, Jackson Dart, Joe Flacco, Tyler Huntley, Spencer Rattler. And I'm like, okay, as much as
they
we
didn't
want
even beat Tyler Huntley.
Right.
They lost that game.
So
that's
as
the
much as people
roster who
want
they played. Yeah.
But here's the thing. So as much as people, I know this is long-winded, but my point here is, as much as we want to crush Eagles play callers and people are crushing Jalen Hurts all season long, I still would like to give the Eagles and Jalen Hurts enough respect here and think that their defense alone can show up in this game and I think do some damage against Caleb. And I also think Caleb just going into Philly for a big time game like this is with stakes on the line. Like, they need to win games here. This is pressure that Caleb in the NFL has yet to go in. Philly's got to be hungry. You mention it all the time. When you get embarrassed, how do you bounce back, Philly? I know everyone's worried about the Eagles. For me, I'm still like, they're still that team. They're still going to figure it out. There's still something there. I'm laying the 7 points with the Philadelphia Eagles. And I know I said that in a very long-winded way, but I'm on Philly.
Listen, that's fine. You'll recall, like, I was on the Eagles against the Packers. I was on the Eagles against the Lions. I got off the Eagles last week. So, like, I'm feeling pretty good about my read on the Eagles overall. And maybe it's just as simple as when they absolutely have to have a win in a game where they're lined only to win, then, or you know what I mean? Or like under a field goal. It's like, like that's the scenario in which we want to back the Eagles. Now, it also, you have to also throw context in there, right? Where those two games against the Packers and the Lions comes off of their bye week, comes off of getting a bunch of new players, most specifically Jalen Phillips, right? Super healthy secondary, all of that kind of thing, right? And it's like, this is going to be the best version of the Eagles that like we're kind of really ever going to get.
Yeah.
Offensively, they scored 10 points in Lambeau, and they score 16 against the Lions. And so, last week they get those 3 touchdowns, like kind of, bang, bang, bang. But like, if the Lions, we didn't even talk about this part about the Cowboys' general operation, but if the Cowboys challenge the penalty on the punt, where the player who's telling everybody, I think it was Flournoy, who's telling everybody, yo, like I touched it, and therefore like it shouldn't be roughing the punter, and like nobody seems to care. And then like the NFL like blames Fox because they were late with like the super slow-mo, but it's just like, you know what? If you're just gonna give the Eagles the possession, like I burn a timeout and your challenge in the first half, like just to see like if my guy is lying or not. And listen, you're deep into the NBA, and like the last thing anybody should be doing is trusting. You're right. Is trusting a player when it comes to a challenge or a review, right? It's like, this guy, I didn't foul him, I didn't touch him, and then like immediately you look and it's like, yeah, no, you actually were all over his forearm, you jackass. And so, again, like, but it was enough that it's like, I don't even care if the guy's telling me that he touched it or not. Like, I gotta sort of challenge that. And so who knows what happens, right? The Eagles certainly don't get to keep going on that drive, and wouldn't have scored a touchdown, and maybe the Cowboys start the comeback a little bit earlier than they necessarily had to. So, my point is that like, they get those 21 points like pretty early on. Obviously the script element of throwing the ball a lot in the first 2 drives would maybe come as a surprise to the Cowboys as well. But when they really need it, the offense just doesn't work. And you just talked about it, man. Like again, like you went long-winded with all the reasons why not to trust Philadelphia. But from a defensive perspective here, right? You mentioned like kind of who is going to be around, who's going to be, going to quite literally show up. They lost Andrew Makuba at the end of that game. Like, he only missed like 4 snaps in that game, but so people kind of noticed that he's just like, I think, out for the season. He's certainly out for this game. Reed Blankenship, right? Like, why did the Cowboys offense start to really work in a deep ball type of a way, where CeeDee Lamb's catching deep balls, and George Pickens was catching deep balls? Reed Blankenship was out. And so now you're out with both of those safeties potentially. Blankenship's questionable. We'll see. Again, short week, you never know. And so if we're left with Sidney Brown, Canadian Sidney Brown, and honestly, I don't even know who from like a safety perspective. And you and I have talked about it, whether it's like Adoree Jackson, who also left, that game last week. He doesn't seem to have an injury designation, but like Quinyon Mitchell or Cooper DeJean, like once you kind of get past those guys and you have to play other people, things get pretty vulnerable pretty quick. And so then we get into the question about like, can your offense, whatever team they happen to be playing, be able to take advantage of those potential mismatches? At this point, I like Ben Johnson to be able to take
Okay.
advantage
Okay.
of those mismatches. And if the other team's offense struggles to get to 20 points and kind of needs the other team to really be complicit in getting them to 20 points,
Yeah.
then if you're asking them to cover 7 and you're sort of running low on dudes, at least in the back end, like the front is still going to be pretty good. And then again, from an offensive perspective, you got Lane Johnson, who seems to be battling a Liz Frank injury. I think is like the sort of the rumor on that. Didn't play last week. Questionable this week, short week. Landon Dickerson's propped up on the injury report. By the way, Devontae Smith and Saquon Barkley have popped up on the injury report. Two guys who were not necessarily on the injury report last week. Devontae Smith, chest shoulder, non-participant at the walkthrough on Tuesday. And if you can't even be listed as a participant on a walkthrough, that's not necessarily ideal. And Saquon Barkley all of a sudden kind of having a groin issue as a limited participant in the Eagles walkthrough. So a lot of potential issues here for this Eagles team that, by the way, just played 3 really important games. And so, like, how many times, we always talk about range, like, where are you going to play on what side of your range? And we expected high side of their range against the Packers, didn't even really get it. We expected high side of their range against the Lions, got it from a defensive perspective, not an offensive perspective. And then they just flat out seemed to run out of gas against the Cowboys. And now on a short week, when again, you're looking around going like, yeah, we lost to the Cowboys, but like, we still don't really think they're going to catch us in the division. And again, you got all these guys kind of banged up, and now we're gonna ask this team to win by 7. Like, again, we'll talk about we can talk all you want about the Bears, beating these teams that aren't all that great, and like the one team that they've played that's in a playoff spot was at Detroit in the second week of the season, and they got absolutely crushed. Like, again, we'll go back to the old thing, right? Like, you can only play the teams that are put in front of you. And in the NFL, it's not easy to win. And so the fact that they are winning these games, they should get more credit. And so for the final sort of point here is that their credit that they're getting in the betting market is a 50 out of 100 as a 500 level team. So it's not, if everybody's talking about all the teams that you've beat not being very good, then like that's the qualitative analysis for seeing that like the market's not really buying into it. And so the quantitative element is that, they think that this team through 11 or 12 games is basically a 500 team with an 8-3 record. And all that might be true, but like that puts them below the Jags, the Texans, the Cowboys, the Chargers with no offensive line, in the ratings. And so like that puts them as the 19th best team in the NFL. And so again, like if this was 20 years ago where people would look at 8-3 and maybe get like all excited about the Bears and be like, oh yeah, they're a contender and this, that, or whatever. That's not really the case here. Everybody's kind of waiting for the Packers or the Lions to kind of take hold of this division. Again, maybe that happens this week because of the matchups that are involved. And so, there's no sort of rating here that's overrating the Bears. I think that really the only thing that's kind of being overrated or underrated is still the Eagles being rated as high as they are. And maybe there's a theme here with all of these sort of royalty teams, right? The Chiefs, the Eagles, the Packers and Lions have sort of kind of gotten the mix here, the Bills and the Ravens. As long as they're going to be still considered these really good teams, like I'm going to still keep kind of fading them unless we get these different matchups where they're playing each other, like the Eagles and Lions, Eagles and Packers, and these teams that then I can go, okay, who do I think can play a more buttoned up game? Who can win this game in a game that is lined underneath a field goal? And so, like, that's not what we have here. We have the Eagles being asked to win and win by margin, something that, like, even when they dominated the Lions 2 weeks ago. And it's like, here comes like a field goal potentially. And like, oh man, like the Lions get the ball back, like down 1 possession. It's like, how? Right? So again, like part of it is just like the Eagles kind of just not playing up to snuff and me expecting them not to play up to snuff on Friday.
This is so tough. And I was very, very close. Very, very close. But I'm sticking with the Eagles here. I'm sticking with the Eagles, and I'm prepared to. Okay. This is more of a. I need to see it, Caleb and company. I need to see it.
They're trying, man. Eight of the last 9. They're like, what else do we need to do?
What more can I do? I got you. I got you. It'll be interesting though, for sure. As we move on to Sunday's action, get a bit of a break on Saturday, take a break from NFL, watch some NCAA, but NFL continues on Sunday with the Colts, who are 4.5-point favorites as they host the Texans. The Colts probably should have beaten the Chiefs, but you know what? Losing to the Chiefs, a lot of teams can say they've done that before. That's all right. Yeah. Offense kind of fell asleep late, 18 total yards in the fourth quarter and overtime. It's not good, but you need those reps for the playoffs if you have bigger goals, which I think the Colts do have bigger goals, and they will be there somewhere towards the end. So I'm not completely jumping off the Colts here. My issue here, as I'm on the Texans plus 4.5, I just think this is too many points because you're going against a top tier defense in the Houston Texans. Not sure yet if now I was about to say Bryce Young, and it's not Bryce Young. If CJ Stroud, right. If CJ Stroud will be back or not. There's something very inappropriate that I was going to say that I'm not going to say it. I'm just going to continue going here. If CJ Stroud is back from his concussion or not really sure. But either way, Davis Mills just continues to prove, as we've been telling you week after week here on the pod, Davis Mills, more than serviceable. Did his thing last week against the Bills on Thursday Night Football. Their defense ate up Josh Allen. I just like the Texans here. I like the Texans points. I like betting on defenses because I trust defenses to travel and show up week in, week out. If you're telling me I'm getting 4.5 points with that defense, and regardless of who's a QB, it's serviceable, I'm going to take the points here.
Okay. All right. So this is the let him cook segment of the show, right? Where this is why I think you bring me on. And it's because of what I do here as far as talking about, all right, if this quarterback's in, we talk about is this a CJ Stroud number? Is this a Davis Mills number, et cetera, right? And we've just spent the last, 3 weeks?
Yeah.
Really just kind of going, all right, I don't really think there's that much of a difference between Davis Mills and CJ Stroud because there's been too many games that I've watched CJ Stroud play and just kind of been I don't know. I don't really think he's good. Yeah. And then, of course, Davis Mills has the reputation from when he played as, in his first 2 years way back when. And so the Texans win that game against the Bills. And so, first and foremost, I think this is a CJ Stroud number. Okay. But the problem is that I don't really think a CJ Stroud number should exist. And so if there's this, what I mean? I don't the Mills, the Texans shouldn't be 6-point underdogs against the Bills at home with Davis Mills. And they honestly probably shouldn't be 4.5 point underdogs on the road with CJ Stroud. It should be actually longer than this because they're both if one guy's here and one guy's here, I kind of think both should be here. Correct. And so if you just said, hey, man, again, we like to use the numbers here, right? And so after we talked last week, Wednesday morning, by Thursday, that line had come down, right? Texans money had come in. They were down 5, maybe in some 4.5s out there. So they were off of 6. And so that basically was the market saying, all right, you're right. We don't think that Mills and the Mills version of the Texans is that bad, and sort of drifting them up, right? And so if you move the Mills level to sort of 45 out of 100, that's where you get with that line on the Bills. And again, like the Ravens game that we talked about earlier, and even the Eagles game that we just talked about, I really had a lot more of an issue with where the Bills are being rated right now, and we'll talk about them again shortly. And so now it's all right, it's going to be Stroud. So what's the team rating? And so, the team rating last week was 45, and what should it be with Stroud? And they've moved this rating up to 55 for the Texans. And I just go no, I think it's both just 50. I think they are the type of team that can almost lose and almost lose easily to the Jags at home. And they can almost kind of lose or at least kind of be in a close game, tied game late at the Texans. And they can also kind of get blown out with CJ Stroud at Seattle, some of these other good teams. And so meanwhile, the Colts, obviously, they lose that game. Their market rating hasn't gotten necessarily crushed by any means, but it isn't as high. They're not expected to play play at the high side of a range that didn't even exist before the season started. It's kind of drifted back because it's like you don't cover by a half point against the Falcons. You do cover by a half point or push against the Chiefs. And even if you just kind of extrapolate backwards, there's under this rating, they still cover a bunch of point spreads before this little stretch of Falcons bye week Chiefs. Meanwhile, they've added Sauce Gardner. They're getting the cornerbacks that were on the roster. They're getting those guys back. And so you're talking about defense, right? Like the Colts defense is getting better. Now, again, as we've talked about in the last couple of weeks, right? The DeForest Buckner issue is, a big deal. Are they getting him back this week? He's gone to the IR, right? So they're not getting him back. But I thought they played pretty well against the Chiefs. Obviously, like eventually Mahomes kind of inevitable in that game. So, listen, who doesn't like the Texans defense? Obviously, after you watch them on Thursday sack Josh Allen over and over and over again, they're going to get the attention for that. But it's the same defense that they've had in the previous 10 weeks of the season, right? It's the same defense that's, again, been great, but not division leader worthy, right?
Yeah.
Like they're not carrying them to sort of a 10-2 type of a record here. It's really just like, whatever the defense can do, like we're hoping to sort of be able to make up for whatever the offense is not doing. And again, I don't really think that the offense is going to do all that much because frankly, I was disappointed with the Texans offense against the Bills. I thought they should have been able to run a lot better against the Bills. And so I just look at it and I go, like the defense is great, but like the Colts offense is very good as well. I think you're going to get a little bit more room, not a ton to run for Jonathan Taylor, but just fundamentally, right? Like I don't believe that the rating should be this high for the Texans. I think that's making a lot of assumptions about CJ Stroud coming off a concussion that knocked him out for 3 weeks. To just assume that he's going to like pick up and be good when like, by the way, he hasn't really been all that great all season long.
Yeah, that's a very key point right there, that he truly and honestly hasn't been that good when he has been in there.
Really 2 seasons.
So with that said, the pick has been changed to Indy at -4.5. And I think the important lesson here, something we always talk about, is when to get on and when to get off. And I've been on the Texans for a while, but it's important to know when the time is to jump off said bandwagon, even if it's just for a week. Just understand the waves. And the other part of this is I totally agree with the CJ Stroud point. I just don't think he's been that good this season at all. And it's almost like we've discussed Mac Jones and Brock Purdy, where it's like, I don't know, I might feel a little bit better with the backup because the backup's just coming in and trying to do the basic plays and run the plays how they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
We'll get to Brock Purdy soon.
Right.
But yes, pick has been changed. Indy -4.5. We will keep it going here to the Panthers. And maybe that's why I had Bryce Young in my mind, because that was the next game. Or maybe I'm just trying to shoot myself some bail here. But either way, Bryce Young and the Panthers are at home hosting the Rams. The Rams are 10-point road favorites. I am laying said points with the Rams and the 10 points just because they just continue to roll. Massive dub against the Bucs. They made the Bucs look just like a garbage team. Baker hurt again. They put Baker out of the game, or maybe Baker's coach put him out of the game. One of the two. I'll let you decide that. But their offense can't be stopped. Their defense is great. Everyone's raving about Matthew Stafford again. Meanwhile, the Panthers, they looked horrible against the Niners. If your defense comes up with 3 picks and you still can't score double-digit points,
dude,
you have some problems. Bryce Young, that pick he threw in the red zone from like the 10 or whatever that was, you just can't do that. You just can't do that. Insane. Horrible. And now you're telling me you're on a short week against what a lot of people are saying are the best team in the league right now. Yeah, that's a double-digit dub to me. I'm on the Rams. I'll lay the 10 points on the road.
Yeah, I can't wait to find out how we don't win this game. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
Because it's like, I'm just sitting there watching, and I'm like watching the Rams game, and I'm like, I will lay whatever you want me to lay next week against Carolina. And the Carolina game hadn't even happened yet. And then I'm watching the Carolina game, And I'm like, I will lay whatever you want me to lay in that game. And the look ahead line was 9.5, right? And I'm like, I'll take 9.5 right now. And then it only kind of goes up 10. There's 10.5, so kind of creeping into the mix as well. So probably have to pay some juice if you really want the 10. I really want to lay the 10, and like I do, because I just you do short week, right? Travel cross country, and all you really do is get beat up, right? Where like JC Horn is concussed to the point apparently of like vomiting like during the game. This is the guy who was the best player on the field for the Panthers in that game, right? Like he was the one like single-handedly was like, we might have a chance to win this because I'm here. They also lose Trayvon Moehrig, suspended for being a jackass. Which again seems to be more and more prevalent in the NFL these days. And then it's in every second play, it sort of seemed like somebody was getting injured on both sort of the defensive front seven and the offensive line, right? Like Chandler Zavala for the Panthers, right? And this is a team that like the strength of the team is the offensive line, and so if that gets compromised, we were on the under Enrico Dowdle on Monday. That's 3 straight games where he has been like under, I think, like 50 yards rushing. So the thing that they were able to do really well, that we've joked about them running basically like one play, this little like toss that like he just runs straight up the middle and they get like 5 yards out of every time. That's dried up. And so, the Bryce Young thing, the thing that bothered me was not just, though it was mostly, but not just that I had Mitchell Evans at 14-1 anytime touchdown for that play. It's that like, listen, if it was a simple drop back and you got to make a few reads and whatever, like I get it, like the red zone, things get tight in there, like interceptions happen. They drew that play up that they would have practiced on repeat, like probably all season long, but at the very least for the sort of long week that they had. And he still couldn't time it correctly to throw the ball early enough because Evans was wide open in the first like 2 or 3 steps that Bryce Young takes. And he just takes forever to throw the ball. And of course, by the time you do that, the 49ers get sort of immediately organized and everybody realizes who's involved in this play and, yada, yada, yada. And so like, it's just the stuff where it's like, if you're not executing just the plays on the play sheet that are designed really to do one thing, the second thing being like, if it's not there, just run, which was also very sort of something he could have done. Like, that's the stuff that drives me nuts because like the other things that happen in a football game, even just like some of the Brock Purdy interceptions, right? Which were pretty grim, but like some of that stuff is just like, all right, you're making a bunch of reads. You don't see JC Horn here. You make a bad throw kind of on the run, like all of that sort of thing. The fact that Bryce Young can't execute a play that they would have practiced multiple times just drove me absolutely insane. And so, between that and like, again, the Rams just looking like an absolute wagon here, like it has to be Rams by like a billion. But that's not really how this works. And so I'm not going to lay it with the Panthers. I'm just going to sort of sit back. I'm going to bet on the Rams and then just laugh about like how like Matthew Stafford, who hasn't thrown an interception in months, is going to. And it's, what I mean? It's going to be like JC Horn's replacement. It's not even going to be Horn. And you're just going to be like, what the hell, NFL? Like, give me a break here. So it's going to be super annoying. And I can't wait to find out how we lose.
Yeah, interesting stuff there for sure. Rams -10. I'll lay the double-digit spread there. We'll stick in the NFC West with the San Francisco 49ers as 5.5-point favorites in Cleveland to take on the Browns. Shedeur Sanders, after last week's game, said, I am who they've been waiting for. And what would it be like after a full offseason? I feel like, you know what? Actually, there's a clip that I didn't post. I feel like I clipped it out of the pod and I didn't post it for whatever reason. I don't know. But we exactly said there's a line last week from last week's pod. I should be flashing back right now. But it was like, they're going to win because you convinced me to switch the pick. I don't know if you remember last week, but what you said was under no circumstances can you lay points with the Raiders against anybody.
That's right.
And so I said, I can't wait for the Browns to win, Shedeur to maybe make like 1 or 2 plays, a check down that gets taken far, and then everyone to just talk so much shit as if like he's the man, this is the best, as if Tebow time never happened. That was a quote I gave last week.
That's right, Tebow. We invoked the holy name of Tebow.
Right. And now here we are watching the praise of course they have to start Shedeur this week. And it's like, do they? All right, sure. Flip side, you got the Niners, just mentioned. Niners were able to beat the Panthers last week. The Niners covered the spread by a lot, despite the fact that Brock Purdy was doing the most to try and mess up that game, while I'm sitting there just cursing, saying Mac Jones would not do that. It's just emboldening me more in my Mac Jones needs to start for this team. And I know it's not going to happen, and I get it, and I understand. But I'm still laying the 5.5 points with the Niners here. I just think it's just more of a buttoned up operation, as it seems to be the term of our pod and this episode for sure. But the Niners aren't dumb. Like, Salah's going to be watching that game and realize the only thing they're going to do on offense is check down to the running back, run the ball. And if Shedeur is going to beat us by throwing deep, cool. But I dare you to do that. So on defense alone, I think the Niners can do this. Their offense of just, let's say, feed McCaffrey, let McCaffrey cook, should be good enough to get that job done. Cover a touchdown. Let's go.
It's wild that they still even, have resorted to that, given like the town, they get all these guys back, right? And it's like, oh, we don't have to just totally rely on Christian McCaffrey. And it's like opening script of that game on Monday. It's like, let's just keep giving it to Christian McCaffrey.
I think though it's Brock Purdy who was just taking every single check down. And then once he was like, okay, let me try to throw it to someone else, pick. And I'm like, oh, jeez.
Yeah, that was a tough scene. And again, like, I guess, part of the good news is like, even 3 interceptions, and like you said, they still cover that game pretty comfortably, because it's easy to sort of watch that game and go like, well, if he threw 3 interceptions against Carolina, how many is he going to throw in Cleveland against the Browns defense? And it's like, that's all fair, but like, really, I'm not sure how many people actually watched, and God will, help you if you did, how many people watched that Cleveland Vegas game. Because the other thing that we talked about last week, Shell, was like, I think if Cleveland just gets like a score or like does anything, they can kind of just run the ball and punt on everything. And if I didn't say that, that was certainly what I was saying as Cleveland got up 14-0. And I'm just sitting there, my wife comes down and starts watching the 4:00 games with me, and there's 4 different games on. And she's like, and of course she knows like, the Dion and Shedeur from all the college football stuff, and like it's just being prevalent in everybody's lives. And so she's sort of, interested into sort of seeing like how Shedeur does or whatever. And like, we're just kind of laughing about like the 2 or 3 plays, like the one play that like he made, right? Finding Isaiah Bond like deep down the field, like, totally like his thing. Nobody mentioning some of the atrocities from, the interception that he threw and some of these other plays that were made. And we're just laughing about how, like, I don't understand why they don't just hand the ball off, because meanwhile, on the other end of the, the other end of the field, your man Gino is out here getting sacked, as you would say, the most. And we're laughing because it's like Myles Garrett sacked, and we're like, why would they ever put the ball in harm's way with Shedeur? And like, I don't even know how to describe the touchdown pass that he had, because like, it's not a check down, because that implies that like there were other reads. Right, where it's like not read 1, not read 2, I'm checking it down. It wasn't even really a screen pass. Like, I guess like if you had to label it something, it would be a screen pass. But it wasn't the type of screen pass that I've ever seen or really sort of pay much attention to, which is like, you draw the defense over to you and throw the ball, you know what I mean? And the linemen get downfield. It was just like one read, throw it to this guy out here and like see if he can break some tackles. And the Raiders are such blank that like they just don't. And so Dylan Sampson's just huffing it down, down the field with like tight fingers. Shout out Kevin Hart and his Netflix documentary if you haven't seen that. He's just tight fingering it down the sideline, and you're just like, yeah, okay, Shedeur. And then of course you referenced his post game comments, and you're just like, dude, like the all time woke up on third, think you hit a triple guy, and like just the all time dude.
Yeah,
and he did, because Dion was on third base a lot of times after hitting triples in Major League Baseball, and so I kind of get it, but at the same time, I also look at that game and go, if you guys weren't watching that game, then we're going to be able to make a bet next week against Shedeur Sanders. And that is absolutely what we're going to do here. And so that is, again, a long way to not sort of break anything down other than like, there was, the Eagles and the Cowboys game was compelling, and the Cardinals and the Jags, was interesting in its own way. So I get why people weren't watching that game. But yeah, I don't think he's going to get those two plays, the bomb to Bond and the screen / check down / I don't even know what you'd call it, to get to the house there. So again, I'm laughing also because like direct snap touchdowns to Quinshon Judkins, like Shedur's not even on the field.
That's what I was going to say.
The first 2 touchdowns, which is just the best. So yeah, man. I don't care that normally it's like, well, Browns at home, underdog spot, like 49ers, whatever. 49ers have their bye week next week. I think they would like to go into this bye week and think that if they get beat by Shedeur Sanders to prevent them from being 9-4 going into the bye week in that division with the competitiveness of that, like I'll leave you with this. I think your boy Robert is salivating to face Shedeur Sanders.
I got nothing there. I
just appreciate you laughing. Thank you.
I'm just gonna say the audacity of Shedeur to like come out and talk all this smack when like you weren't even allowed to touch the ball in the red zone.
Yeah,
they're just like.
No. Like, we're just gonna snap it directly to Judkins. We don't even want you lining up. We don't want you lining up as a receiver, just in case you get a notion. I mean, you probably don't even know where to line up as a receiver. Like, we don't want you to be like, illegal formationing. Just get off the field. Yeah. We'll just give it to Judkins and get the hell out.
We don't even trust you to hand the ball off. Like, what? Yeah. It's insane. Run the dive play. We don't trust you to do that. Sorry, Shedeur. Anyways, Niners is the bet there. We move on to the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are hosting the Buffalo Bills. Bills, 3.5-point road favorites. Bills, as mentioned earlier, coming off a loss to the Texans on Thursday night. Josh Allen had a tough go. He looked banged up and bruised, and I guess not as bruised as your man's Aaron Rodgers, who did the thing that you predicted would happen. Pretend as if he was going to play right up until Sunday morning.
We've had some good calls on this show. Like you mentioned the one that we probably could have clipped. We had the one that we clipped from a couple of weeks ago about like the Commanders like putting their players in harm's way before Jaden Daniels got hurt in a blowout. That might be the best one because it's just like it's the most Rod thing ever.
It's so good.
It's like, he's pushing to play with the phrase. It's like, what does that even mean? What are you talking about? What's pushing to play mean? He's got a broken wrist. Like, is he doing, wrist curls? Like, what's pushing to play me? Is there a Rocky montage that we need to show? Like, what are you talking about? You're pushing to play.
Absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. What do we got here? The Bills coming off a tough loss. You said it last week. The Bills are probably in trouble, and they looked like they were in trouble last week. Doesn't get it gets easier, but I don't know how much easier this week because the Steelers, now you're going into Pittsburgh, tough place to play. The Pittsburgh defense still isn't the Pittsburgh defense of the past that we've known, but they're still a solid unit. Rodgers, they're trying to do the same thing again this week as if will Aaron Rodgers play. But I think Mason Rudolph showed that he is serviceable. He can, fill in a week or two at a time. I like the Steelers here, plus the 3.5 points. I will ask, though, if this is the Aaron Rodgers, is there an Aaron Rodgers line versus a Mason Rudolph line? No. Is that the same thing right now? No. Either way, I'm on the Pittsburgh plus 3.5.
You saw it last week, right? There was 2.5 on Wednesday. With Aaron Rodgers pushing to play, and it was 2.5 when they announced that Aaron Rodgers, the push failed, and he would not be playing. And it's like, yeah, all right. I think like it might have gone from like minus 110 for the Bears to minus 120.
Yeah,
it was like it did that move where it was like we're not giving you 3. We're certainly not doing that. And it ended up if they had, it would have been a push. And that sort of indicates that like, not only was there not an adjustment, but it's also like a really fair line on the Steelers. It's just like, that's what the Steelers are. And so I will sort of zag on you here a little bit. I do think there actually is a difference between Rudolph and Rodgers. And so, and it's small, right? And I think there was a clip, and I forget who sort of, somebody referenced it. I really wish I could sort of give them credit because I hate it when people do that. But put it this way, on the broadcast, they showed like Aaron Rodgers, he's like basically calling out that the Steelers were going to basically headed for an illegal formation.
Okay.
And it's the type of thing that Mason Rudolph like doesn't notice.
I got you.
And you know what I mean? And it's that thing that you and I talk about, even going back to the like old days, the last days of like Peyton Manning and some of these veteran quarterbacks, that it's just like, honestly, it's just better that they're out there to get them into sort of the correct play and avoid some 5-yard penalties and stuff like that. And so when Rodgers is out there and they have these pre-snap penalties, it's the frustrating thing where it's like, I'm not even asking you to throw the ball yet, and this team is screwing stuff up. So with him again sort of pushed through and being, looking like he's going to come back here, the rating for the Steelers has not really changed. It's just kind of hovered. If 50 is our dividing line between as an average team, they have just toggled between 51 and 49. They're literally like just back and forth on it. And so that line that rating hasn't changed. So we go back to our little royalty group here of the Buffalo Bills. That game was closer than it felt because of how dominated the Bills got by the defensive line of the Texans. And you just look at the Steelers and go, can that defensive line do that against the Bills? It's like, yeah, kind of like they can. And so if they can, then like the Bills need to be rated lower, or the assumption needs to be made that the Bills are going to play to the low end of their range. And yet, as 3.5-point road favorites here, we know that the Bills rating has still just kind of stuck at high 60s type of territory, right?
Yeah.
Right in there with the Packers, a little bit behind the Lions, a little bit behind the Seahawks, a little bit behind the Eagles. And it's just like, again, they're dining out on this win over the Chiefs, which was like this all-in type of deal because it is every year for the Bills.
Yeah.
But other than that, there's like a beat down of the Panthers and a beat down of the Jets. There's just really nothing else to sort of say that they are, among the candidates, the contenders, if you will, for an AFC championship.
Yeah.
It just isn't.
No, for sure. I totally agree with you. And I think it's one of those where if the Thursday night spotlight didn't show that enough to you,
that's right,
then nothing else will. So we're still here looking at that the following week. And it's like, all right, cool.
And Shell, it's a tough thing. Yeah, it's a tough thing for somebody who does what I do, where it's like I have to put on paper, so to speak, like a pick for this game and a handicap for this game. So the Bills being what we've seen from the Bills and Josh Allen specifically, to sort of just write down on paper and just say to people essentially, like, this is not that team. No matter kind of what Josh Allen, I shouldn't say no matter, because like Josh Allen can kind of overcome everything and kind of almost did. But it's just to put out and be like, this team just kind of isn't any good.
Yeah.
And then to watch a game and just be like, all right, well, let's see if I'm right. And like, if I'm wrong, it's out there in front of everybody. And to see that, like, no, actually, like, I was right about that. And so I'm going to kind of keep going with that. Now, could the Steelers do a bunch of stuff to blow their opportunity here for a win that I think compared to the Ravens, right? Ravens couldn't keep up or couldn't keep the lead against the Bills. And when you compare those two teams who are needing to be compared at the top of the AFC North, the Steelers can get a win over the Bills, while the Ravens have a loss to the Bills. Like, these are the things that like kind of add up from like a tiebreaker, standings, all of that kind of stuff standpoint.
No, for sure. And I'm looking forward to seeing how much more tortured Bills fans can be trying to buy into their team this season. Let's keep going though. We'll go with the Bucks, who are 3-point favorites at home against the Cards. Tough loss for the Cards in OT to the Jags. Jacoby Brissett just throwing the rock. I can't believe that is their offensive game plan. But I mean, what else do they have? What else could it possibly be? I don't know. And I mean, I don't even want to blame Jacoby Brissett, because he's just Jacoby Brissett being Jacoby Brissett, right?
Yeah.
It's not his fault. That's a position
he's making plays.
He's making plays. He's doing his thing. Meanwhile, Baker had to leave the game, as we mentioned last week, against the Rams I don't know what Baker's status is. They're trying to make it seem as if it's possible he could play. I don't know how you go from being in a sling 1 week to then playing the following week, but Baker's just that tough, I guess. I'm going to take the 3 points here with the Cards, and I don't know if this is a Baker line or a non-Baker line, but if Teddy Two Gloves is in, like, does that really make them still 3-point favorites? Like, is Teddy Two Gloves their only option? I don't know what's going on here with the Bucs, to be honest with you here, but I will say, I know that Jacoby Brissett's going to be throwing the ball here, and you're telling me I can get 3 points against a banged up Bucs team beyond Baker? Yeah, I'm in with that.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? It's so weird that the other option is Teddy Bridgewater.
Yeah.
Like,
I did a triple take to be like, who is that at quarterback? I had no idea who that was when I first turned that on. I'm like, what is happening right now?
I will see when you see him, you're like, that's definitely Teddy Bridgewater. It's more just like, oh, Teddy Bridgewater is the backup quarterback for Tampa. Like, he was doing that Lions thing for a while. And of course, they documented the high school thing where he gets in trouble for like buying kids coffees and Ubers and stuff like that. Getting back to the point is that, like, this is definitely not a Baker Mayfield line unless the loss to the Rams was such that, like, the market is just way out on the Buccaneers. So again, we do this quantitatively, to give everybody kind of an idea. And this was actually a pretty low rating for the Buccaneers, but when we went to that game last week, or into that game last week, the Buccaneers rating was around 53, 54, right? And again, like I said, that's kind of a low rating, but you know what? When you stop winning games, you're going to see your rating kind of fall down. That 53 or 54 rating would result in about a 5.5 point spread in this game, right? So the Baker healthy, even though we're not psyched about the Tampa, team, is probably like -5. And so we're at 3 here, which I'm going to say kind of feels like an in-between line, because if it's Teddy Bridgewater, I don't know how Teddy Bridgewater can be favored in an NFL football game.
This is what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Right, because I mean, we see it, part of why we do what we do over at the window, with, the sort of boring stuff, right? The math, the ratings, the charts, the graphs is so that you understand that when a team loses its starting quarterback, what the rating then becomes for most of those teams, unless it's a Stroud Mills. But even the Stroud Mills thing, we think it's probably tighter. But like, the Texans took a pretty significant ding in their rating. The 49ers, even before Mac Jones played pretty well, took a pretty significant ding. And so the fact that this isn't a significant ding tells me that it's in between, but also, like, I don't know, like, if we got to kind of put them down to, some of these other teams' levels when they lose their starting quarterback, I don't know, like 33, like, is that kind of a fair assessment on a Buccaneers team who, with Mayfield, wasn't necessarily playing all that great? Like, a 33 puts this game at a pick 'em.
Yeah.
And so at that point, you go, all right, you're really just asking the Buccaneers, you start making that, creating the narrative of, like, maybe Bucky Irving comes back and it turns into a very sort of run-oriented game, and you're just asking the Bucs, pretty good defense against Jacoby Brissett, to just kind of win the game. Yeah. Like, okay, so I'm going to want to know. I'm going to want to know that I can get that sort of pick 'em number if it's Teddy Bridgewater. And if it's not Teddy Bridgewater, I think it should be pick 'em, and therefore I would want +3. And so if it's 3 right now, grab the +3 and hope Teddy Bridgewater plays. Worst case scenario, I suppose, is that Baker Mayfield is playing. The line goes up to, I don't even know if it goes up to 5, because the guy could go out at any moment, right? Maybe it goes to 4. Something like that. And so it's like, oh, you lost out on +4, but like, Baker Mayfield's out there with like one arm basically. And so it's kind of the same, from what I understand, it's also, similar injury, like his shoulders were an issue in Cleveland. Remember when it went south for Baker in Cleveland, he was playing through an injury. I don't know. Does that guy feel like he needs to be playing through this injury now that he's kind of finally made his official name for himself in the NFL? So yeah, like, to me, that's what's going on with this game. Like, again, I don't hate the Bucs if you're getting like a pick 'em type of a deal here, but that's not what the market is currently saying, right? The market is kind of tipping toeing in between these two sort of numbers.
Yeah, super interesting stuff here. And as I look at the games that we've already talked about, for the record, I'm on Arizona plus the 3 points here. But as I look back at some of the games that we've already talked about, we've been talking about some really, really good quarterbacks. And we're kind of into the realm here where we're talking about the not so good quarterbacks with the last game that we'll get to because it's Monday night being the Giants and Jameis Winston. But it makes me think about like how many of these teams would rather have Jameis Winston as their quarterback. So think about this going forward, right? You got Teddy Two Gloves and Jacoby Brissett in this game.
No.
And as we move on to our next game, which is the Vikings and Seahawks, I think the Seahawks are good with Sam Darnold, right? He's been doing his thing. But your man's JJ McCarthy comes in here, and he will be in Seattle as a 10.5-point underdog. Vikings lost last week to the Packers. McCarthy had, 4 net yards in the second half, 2 picks, 5 sacks. He was not doing well. I heard Cousin Sal say this, and I don't think this is true. It can't be true, that he would have had a better passer rating if he just spiked the ball every time. Like, I don't know how that's possible. But then when you're like net 4 yards, like it's just, anyways, let's get to the game. Seattle Seahawks, big time win last week. You know, Seahawks, Sam Darnold against his former team is a very interesting thing here. JSN just continues to be a beast. Is Flores a guy that could maybe slow down this offense and slow down Sam Darnold? Maybe, possibly. The 10.5 points is a lot. I'm laying the 10.5 points here, but I could be easily talked into the fact that even as bad as McCarthy is, the defense alone won't allow them to lose by 10.5.
Well, I'll tell you what, my friend, here on Wednesday, you can now get 11.5 over at DraftKings is the new point spread.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a couple of takers on that one, couple takies on that one. The first foremost being, I think that move is for the potential that we see Max Brosmer for
who
the Vikings.
That's not a real person. That sounds like a Simpsons character.
Your boy Matt, he plays for the Springfield Isotopes. They've called him up. No, Minnesota's own, or at least University of Minnesota's own, right? Golden Gopher, Max Brosmer, who like there's like this like cult following, and I think it's just because like nobody wants anything to do with Carson Wentz, and the people who are still wondering why JJ McCarthy was drafted in the first round want to sort of be right, and honestly might be. It's not a dispersion on that take. I might have that take, for example. And so like there's and Brosmer played in the preseason. Right. Okay. That's sort of the other element to all of this, right? Where he was the guy playing a lot in the preseason. And so when you get to a point where even if we're not sure whether that sort of Cousin Sal fact was a fact or not, it just like that's telling, right? It's telling that we're like, yeah, you know what? They might have been better if they're just, my thing with Shador was like just hand the ball off, like take 40 seconds per play, hand the ball off, and then just let Myles Garrett take shots on Geno Smith for, the rest of the game. And so I guess my first thing is like, why are we positive that Max Brosmer's worse than JJ McCarthy?
It's tough.
And even a move from 10.5 to 11.5. And so, part of this is because I don't know if you saw this, but like Kevin O'Connell announced that JJ McCarthy had concussion symptoms crop up after the game.
That's tough.
Which is sounding a lot like ankle issues that cropped up after week 2. Again,
I see what we're doing here. I see what we're doing here.
Point fingers, but you're just like, is that what we're just gonna do with this kid? We're just gonna. So I don't think they're actually faking injuries or all of that sort of thing. But man, it is kind of funny that we're seeing these late in the deal. He got drilled a bunch. He got knocked around a bunch against Green Bay, right? And again, like the fact that they were down that entire game and he only had 19 pass attempts, like that's a game where like the dude's got 40 pass attempts because it's like, all right, we're firing our way back into this game. But it's like when you cannot move the ball at all, like you're not allowed an unlimited amount of downs. You have to accrue some first downs and able to be able to throw the ball that much. And so I guess my point is that one, I don't think Brosmer is necessarily a downgrade, or that we know that he's a downgrade. Also because like how many times, sort of pre Sam Darnold last year, did we see Kevin O'Connell just kind of make it work with some really kind of random dudes, right?
Facts.
What's Hobbs, right? Hobbs? Is that a guy?
Josh
Hobbs?
Dobbs.
Dobbs. I was like, Hobbs
right?
isn't
He's an
saying right.
astronaut guy.
Dobbs, yeah. That's right. The pastronaut. So if this is a guy, like, you have to play, you sort of have to play Carson Wentz, I guess, when he was there. And then you definitely have to play JJ McCarthy. And it's like, Brosmer is a guy that if you play him over JJ McCarthy, things start to get very sort of sketchy, right?
Yeah.
And so whether or not it's symptoms or protocol and so on and so forth, it's a massive downgrade to the Vikings. It is again, we just talked about like Teddy Bridgewater, being sort of prominently involved. Like, I'm getting down to a 30 with the Vikings here.
Okay.
32, let's call it, to get to 11 and a half. I don't know. I can't get that low for the Vikings. Like, even with JJ McCarthy, I'm I mean, he's been bad, but he's like, there have been glimpses. And like, honestly, if we saw last week with the Titans, sometimes all you need is a glimpse to kind of cover some of these numbers. And so, yeah, like, it has to be 11 and a half. And honestly, like, weird as it may sound, like, I'm hoping that it is Max Brosmer who is going to play in this game, because I would like to see sort of what he's capable of doing, if it's just as simple as kind of getting the team in and out of, the correct plays and in and out of the huddle, and not taking like a multitude of sacks. And so, what are you going to say about the Seahawks, right? Like, the Seahawks are great. Awesome team. Rating is what the rating is. Did not cover last week, but sort of lived in the universe where they could have, being up 30-10. That's kind of what happens when it comes to these big numbers. Are they going to get two defensive touchdowns the way they did against the Cardinals, 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago? Are they going to get, special teams and defensive touchdowns the way they did in covering a decent sized number against the Saints earlier on in the season? All of that is certainly possible. The one thing I'll sort of leave you with, right? We just referenced Sam Darnold. Brian Flores, is he at all familiar with Sam Darnold's work?
Very much so.
Facing him in practice all last season. And so if there's, sort of, and the thing is, like, Justin Jefferson is, or maybe it's the other way, Jackson Smith and Jigba is to Justin Jefferson, right? As Sam Darnold is to Sam Darnold from last season. So if you're sitting there in practice going against, all right, that dude that we have to stop, Justin Jefferson, now it's that dude that we have to stop, Jackson Smith and Jigba, like, it's not that easy, but like, he's seen it. Like, you can't get kind of a better setup than that. And so maybe it's a matter of the Vikings being able to kind of get their offense a little bit together here. They ran the ball pretty well against the Packers. I wouldn't be shocked. Let me just
something.
Leave it there. I wouldn't be shocked. ... I wouldn't be shocked.
There's a pick being changed here to Minnesota plus 11.5 here. This is just basically, it can't get much worse from the quarterback spot. It really can't. That's all I'll say on that one. Let's keep going here, though, to our next game, which involves the Tennessee Titans hosting the Jacksonville Jaguars. Tennessee is 6.5-point underdogs at home, taking on Trevor Lawrence, who had 4 turnovers in that game last week. One fumble, 3 picks, something like that. Either way, bottom line, it wasn't very good.
Yeah.
It wasn't very good. But they still won.
Jekyll and Hyde at best.
Yeah. Somehow they came out with another victory. They beat the Cards in OT. Meanwhile, the Titans, they were getting blown out, but they came back late for a beautiful backdoor cover that almost actually gave them a chance to win the game somehow.
Like, they were doing onside kick action.
Yeah, they were doing stuff. Cam Ward continues to look okay. I'm going to take the 6.5 points here just because, I mean, Trevor Lawrence seems that he likes to keep other teams involved. So if you're going to give me 6 points, 6.5 points, I'll take the 6.5 points.
Yeah. I don't want anything to do with the Jaguars at this rating, right? This
Jaguars on the road laying 6.5. Woo!
Yeah, I mean that's sort of the qualitative, sort of reflection of just the Jags being rated as an above average team. And whether it's the Jags or some of these other teams, the minute now I'll use the Falcons as an example, like the NFC version of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Is any time they're going to getting this regard. And the thing that annoyed me the most, and the number came off of 3 by the time kickoff rolled around last week. But just the idea that people bet on the Jags at -3 or even -2.5 and like got away with it, whether it was off the push on
That was
3
one
or
of the
actually
pushes.
won
Yeah.
on -2.5, like that's just so annoying because it's just like that's just such a ridiculous bet to like just logically to just be like, yeah, I think the Jags on the road, laying points are like the right move here. And then the fact that like that one, because like the Cardinals didn't know like the spike thing. Like, dude, I think the first ever like sporting strategy thing that
Mhm.
I understood as a kid, or that I learned as a kid,
Mhm.
was the spiking of the ball to stop the clock.
Yeah.
Like that was like number one, where it's like, oh, like I get, oh, that's interesting. Like I'm 8 years old. Like I'm going, oh, okay. So you stop it to stop the clock, and okay, it goes to second down, but like the clock is more important. The Cardinals make that big play. Jacoby Brissett finds Wilson down the field. They make that big play. They could have spiked it at 16 if they lollygagged the way that they did. Probably if they were again buttoned up, they could have got down there, maybe spiked it at 18 and given themselves 2 shots at the end zone to win. Instead, they let the clock go down to 10 seconds where they can run one quick play instead of 2, open up
Yeah.
the playbook type of a play. Obviously not running the football necessarily, but throwing the ball into the end zone type of play. When you've got a guy by the name of Trey McBride, by the way, who is awesome,
Mhm.
and if you give him 2 chances on kind of a box out jump ball type situation, I like my chances that he's going to get one of those 2. No, we're not going to bother spiking it. We're just going to run the play and then, of course, kick a field goal to go to overtime where we lose in overtime. Like, it's the, again,
It's
8-year-old me has, I've known that for an alarming amount of time that, like, you have to spike the ball there. And nobody on the Cardinals seemed to sort of understand that. Drove me nuts.
go Tennessee. Go Tennessee.
Yeah, I know. We
That's my
just didn't even
takeaway.
talk anything about Tennessee. What were we going to say about Tennessee? Maybe they get another punt return from Shimmer DK. Like that'd be
Right?
sick. Because
Let's go.
I think we've talked about that. But yeah, what are you gonna say
Tennessee
about them?
plus
They're a little bit
six and a
better. I
half.
will say about Tennessee, just real quick. I will say they are a little bit better. They are a little bit better, and they are not technically the worst team in the NFL by market rating.
Yeah. Let's go Tennessee.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're moving on to the Dolphins, who are at home, off a bye, hosting the Saints. Dolphins are getting 6 points, and I probably wouldn't lay the 6 points with the Dolphins if they weren't at home, if they weren't off a bye, and if they weren't playing against the Saints. But with all of those things, I am laying the points with the Miami Dolphins. And the Saints, I mean, you lost to Kirk Cousins and the Atlanta Falcons, which is the next game we'll talk about. So maybe I'll save a bit of that for the next game. But if you get smashed by Kirk Cousins and the Falcons, that's a tough go. That's a very tough go. I'm on the Dolphins very easily here. Like I'm gonna lay to 6 points, not watch this game, and just check the score. Check the ticker for the latest, as they say in certain parts.
Yeah, in certain eras, probably when I was around 8 years old, learning about the spiking rule. So I brought up at the very end there, the Titans aren't the worst rated team in the market. I did so for a reason, hoping that this was going to be the next game on the slate. Because guess who, in this rotating band of renowned, is the worst team by market rating in the NFL this week? It's New Orleans Saints, everybody. That's what Kirk Cousins' career has come to, where if you lose to Kirk Cousins, you get dropped to the worst team in the NFL. Now, the funny thing about that game is that, like, Kirk Cousins hit one deep ball to Darnell Mooney, and that's funny because it's been everybody's been waiting all season for Darnell Mooney to get involved, to be somebody other than Drake London. And other than that, it was pretty much just Kirk Cousins throwing pick sixes and getting sacked and fumbles that may or may not be getting recovered and all of that sort of thing, all of the usual stuff from Kirk Cousins. And the problem for the Saints was they were goal to go an offensive amount of times, whilst failing an absurd amount of times. And the funny thing is that like they have Taysom Hill, whose whole sort of deal is versatility in goal to go situations.
The only reason
but they never, but they never really did the thing that like Taysom Hill does best, or at least when they tried to, they would snap the ball over Taysom Hill's head and therefore have to settle for a field goal on third down, though we'll never know what the play was necessarily going to be. There was a lot of Taysom Hill faking running and then throwing. There was a lot of just nonsense and hijinks and tomfoolery. The point is that like I keep betting Taysom Hill to score a touchdown here because they know that that's their best option down by the goal line, and they keep running plays for them, but they keep screwing them up. And it's just like, if you just ran the play correctly, that used to seemingly work all the time, we wouldn't be in a situation where I got to bet on the Saints in Miami this week, because the rating change for the Saints is excessive relative to how that game actually was played, right? Like everybody, again, watching other games, potentially, maybe they're all watching Shador, watching other games and not realizing that like the Saints were very much sort of 50-50 with the Falcons in that game, but like they lost the high leverage stuff for some of the dumbest reasons imaginable. And so, you know, out of sight, out of mind, it's been a while since the Dolphins played, right? The game in Spain against the Commanders, they win in overtime, which is really just two teams clunking their head together for 60 plus minutes. And then eventually one team sort of having to win by rule. And so maybe the market's giving the Dolphins credit for that because we're drifting towards the high side of the Dolphins market rating. But having watched that game, as I always do, I'm sorry, man. Like, I still think the Dolphins, and let's put it this way, I think the Dolphins and the Commanders are about the same. The current market rating for those two teams is not the same. And so that means that the Dolphins are overrated. Talk a little bit more about the Commanders here in a second. And just the fact that I mentioned that the Saints are back to being the worst rated team in the NFL, having 2 weeks ago gone on the road and won a game against a bad team in the Carolina Panthers. Sorry, I can't get behind that either. I think the Saints are a little bit better than that. I think the Dolphins are a little bit worse than their current rating. And I don't trust Tua Tagovailoa in the same way that I didn't trust Kirk Cousins last week. Yeah, burned me last week. We'll see if it burns anybody willing to trust Kirk Cousins again this coming week. In this case, again, I didn't think it was that bad for the Saints other than the goal line offense. But man, you watch some of these teams and they're just trying to get to goal line offense. They can't even do that. So, you know, at least that was something for the Saints last week.
No, I got you. And I think that makes a lot of sense here when you look at this, because sometimes, you know, just me overthinking things. Sometimes it's just, you got to take it back to basics. And that sound you hear is me changing the pick to New Orleans +6. And I'm going to say it's a lot of the same logic as the previous game, whereas the Jags laying 6.5 points. Why would I do that? The Dolphins laying 6 points. Why would I do that?
Right.
Makes no sense. So pick has been changed and we keep it going here to our next game. Hey, sometimes we make it just way too simple, right? Sometimes I got to simplify it, right?
Why would I do that?
Why would I do that? Make it make sense. Our next game, we got the Falcons laying 2.5 points on the road. I could basically stop there and just say, why would I do that?
Let's just stop there then. Let's just move on.
The Falcons are in New York taking on the Jets. Falcons, we just talked about it. Kirk Cousins, I mean, he tried. I mean, he did enough. He dumped it to Bijan enough times, or handed it off to Bijan enough times to like let Bijan cook at least. But yeah, as just mentioned, Falcons on the road by 2.5 points. Kirk Cousins now going outside. None of that sounds good. I'm on the Jets. Give me the 2.5 points. The Jets played hard against the Ravens. Cool. They tried.
Yeah. Tyrod Taylor, like fully sort of serviceable. real quick on the Falcons, Drake London doubtful for this game. Kirk Cousins last week, right, hits that long pass. Other than that, like I said, it was pretty grim. Hits that long pass for 49 yards, still doesn't crack 200 yards passing. Right? His QBR was 37.9
stuff in there, right? I'm sure there's some Bijan receptions in there too.
Right? Yes, that's a great point as well, right? I mean, yeah, like they're making it, it's very Shedeur Sandersy, right? They're making it kind of as easy as they possibly can on your guy Kirk. Yeah, it was 14 carries for 70 yards, two catches for 37 yards last week for Bijan. So yeah, having that outlet there, is great. But like when that's all your offense, that's not good. So the Jets, I think part of the reason why they go to Tyrod here is like they just need somebody to get the ball into guys' hands so they can evaluate those guys.
Yeah.
So it happens last week or 2 weeks ago, right? John Mechie, who they trade for from Philadelphia, I believe that was in the Michael Carter trade. And they're like, we need to play John Mechie. We need to play Adonai Mitchell. And the problem with Justin Fields is like we don't get to find out if any of those guys are actually good because he's just sailing ball like all over the map, and like he can't even execute and is unwilling to execute even just a check down to Breece Hall, who also, like, by the way, like still could use some evaluation as far as like, is he like the guy, or is he just kind of like another like pretty decent running back? And so I think really when you go like, well, why would you go to Tyrod Taylor here? Like, that's why. It's for everybody else on the roster.
Yeah.
It's, because like, well, we know Justin Fields sucks, and we can't figure out whether anybody else sucks because Justin Fields' suckitude is so aggressive that like no one has a chance to get a ball. And then Tyrod comes in, and John Mechie all of a sudden has 6 catches in this game last week against Baltimore. And 5 of them were in the first half when the game was still competitive. And so it wasn't just like, oh, we're getting blown out, throw. And so, that sort of example of being able to kind of evaluate the rest of your team just kind of goes to show, just if you just do the basic stuff here. And honestly, Breece Hall fumbles in that game, and it was really kind of a crucial fumble, and that sucks for him, and it sucks for the Jets or whatever. But like, you take that out, maybe again a functional team runs a play, goal line offense, and they score a touchdown. Now all of a sudden the Ravens are worried a little bit, and the Jets are actually starting to play well. And so I think the Jets here, even though their rating, put it this way, their rating obviously got crushed when they traded Sauce and Quinn and Williams, and again, with Justin Fields, the results pretty dicey as well, where, they get the kind of closing line push against the Patriots that, in the following week. But, again, playing a little bit better here, right? The defense isn't terrible. And, again, they beat Cleveland with 2 special teams touchdowns. So that's certainly at least in the mix for a possible result. So yeah, you talk about 2 straight wins and then kind of like competitive like, on the road against the good teams. Why can't the Jets win this game against Kirk Cousins and outdoors and, without Drake London and all of that sort of thing? Like, why are the Falcons considered 4 points better if you give the Jets a 1.5 for home field, right? That mean you're telling me that the Falcons are 4 points better? Again, that just goes to show, it tells me that you didn't watch the game against, Falcons and Saints last week. And so, I think there's some, value to be kind of taken from that.
Unfortunately, in my 2 quarterback league, my second quarterback is the aforementioned Kirk Cousins. So I did watch that game.
Oh, dear God.
Exactly. I will just move on now to our
documentary needs to be made just on that.
Super painful. Our next game, the Chargers, 10-point favorites hosting the Raiders. The Raiders, as mentioned, really, really, really bad. Yeah, really bad. And they fired Chip Kelly as if that's going to like switch anything or change anything to help Geno, who got sacked, 10 times last week. Meanwhile, the Chargers Chargers coming off a bye. Chargers, I mean, this is probably a great way to come off a bye, having to face the Raiders here. I'm going to lay the points here with the Chargers, just feeling that you got to be buttoned up here, whether your O-line is still banged up or not. Like a full week of practice. Now you got to face Max Crosby. I know that's not the ideal situation for a banged up offensive line, but
that's right.
Gino will give you enough room to play with here to try to put some points up on the board. That's my hope as I lay the 10 points with the Chargers.
Yeah, I mean, I hate this game.
Of course.
Because
it's the last game before we get to the Sunday nighter and Monday nighter.
Yeah, there's a reason we're getting to this at hour 11 of the pod. I hate the game because it's like I really was into never betting on the Raiders ever again because I had such a great time betting against them with Shedeur Sanders of all people. And if you can win a bet betting on Shedeur Sanders, the other team must be really in rough shape. That being said, you mentioned Max Crosby. You mentioned the Chargers being unable to block. I'd like to think maybe there's a bye week salvage in there. You know what I mean? Like some adjustments that can be made. Figure out something. Because honestly, they kind of figured out something against the Steelers the week before, right? So it hasn't been like repeated over and over and over again. They can't block. That's been repeated. But like losing because of that hasn't been repeated over and over again. So, but like laying 10 points, I don't really want to do that. And so, again, the offensive coordinator thing, right? Is it like the new coach bump element where it's like, as long as it's somebody other than Chip Kelly, who again spent a lot of time in college and other than being on an absolutely loaded Ohio State team that is just permeated with stars over the entire NFL, other than being on that team, I didn't really have a ton of success, right? The UCLA deal didn't really go all that great. So maybe there's an improvement on play calling, right? Because there's inevitably some guy who has never called plays or, whatever, gets an opportunity to do it. And when you have Ashton Genty and Brock Bowers, like maybe there are some plays that can be sort of run here that give both of those guys a better chance to kind of do something. And so with that kind of quote unquote spark element to it, that would have me leaning towards the Raiders getting the +10. But then also means I'm now back to betting on the Raiders and probably hating myself around, 4:45 to 5:45 on Sunday when, like they're still unable to do anything on offense to block anybody up front, et cetera, et cetera. A certain point, right? The offensive line is so bad that like, I mean, it's just two teams with terrible offensive lines.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, that's not going to work. It's not going to work at all. So maybe there's something else in there.
Hopefully, and hopefully there's something to entertain us before we get to the Sunday nighter, which is the Commanders who are hosting the Denver Broncos. And the Denver Broncos in this one favored on the road by a whopping 6.5 points. And if I look at this one, right, you're talking the Broncos favored by 6.5 points. Both teams coming off a bye. So both teams, as just mentioned, some time to figure some stuff out. But I just like the Broncos here as an operation, like them better going into the bye week, still love them coming out of the bye week. And the Commanders still just seem to be a mess. I don't know what they're doing here. Is Jane Daniels coming back? I don't even know why there's talk of Jane Daniels coming back this season. I don't really know what the point of that would be, as he's banged up already. But just a tough scene for the Commanders that I'm not sure the bye week is going to cure. So I'm going to lay the 6.5 points on the road, which in a game that I just think is a weight class matchup here. And I hope to be getting the best version of the Denver Broncos coming out of the bye week. And they're just flat out better than the Commanders. That's where I'm at. I don't like laying 6.5 points on the road.
No. And the good news for you is that you can lay 6 now. And there's even some places where you can lay 5.5. The bad news is the market is sort of telling you that maybe +6.5 was too many. It's always the catch-22 of like, cool, I get a better number. Not so
Wait
cool.
a second.
Wait a minute. Like, oops, I might not be sort of on the right side here. I'm kind of, in a weird way, like proud of the Commanders for only giving up, 13 points in regulation. They didn't give up the field goal in overtime. Marcus Mariota gave that up when he threw the interception in that game in Spain to start overtime, which is, again, electric stuff. Obviously, the big issue, right, is Commanders defense, god awful, Dan Quinn goes, I'm going to take over the play calling. I saw what Dan Campbell did, and I've decided I think I can do that. And we all kind of made fun of it, going like, "Oh, what can you do with like the Commanders' defense?" It's like, well, it turns out like listen, the best thing that the Dolphins do is play a little offense from time to time, and they did pretty well, like on a neutral field in like a weird situation in friggin' Spain. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm kind of proud of you for that. And if that can kind of translate, doing different things, mentioned the bye week, to against a Broncos team that, like, how many times are we underwhelmed by the Broncos playing some of these kind of, low end type teams? We just talked about how like we hate the Raiders. Wasn't that long ago that the Raiders went to Denver and had every opportunity to beat the Broncos. And so, they didn't, because the Raiders are the Raiders. I don't, but the point is the Broncos sort of allowed them to be able to do that. And so that's what I would be sort of concerned about here. And that why I hadn't bet Washington, because I thought we might get +7, especially if we sort of officially get that, like, Mariota in, Jaden Daniels out. He's still sort of lingering in questionable terms here. If that is why the line is kind of coming down, it just then becomes a wait and see thing, right? Where I can see the line popping. If we think that the line is kind of like an in-between number and now it's starting to drift towards Daniels playing, if it comes back and Mariota's playing, like, I could get +7 maybe. Like, that would be sweet. But also, if I could get +6 knowing that Daniels is playing, I'd be down with that too, to be honest, right? And just because we kind of know, think we all are of the opinion that maybe he shouldn't play and kind of shut it down, and like you're putting him in harm's way and all of that sort of thing. If they don't, it's not our franchise. We don't own it. Like, if they don't, then we're getting Jaden Daniels here as like a potential 6-point home underdog, because, people still have, again, a factually based opinion about the Commanders' defense that, by the way, played pretty decently when their head coach kind of took over in its last game, 2 weeks ago. So yeah, man, I think the Commanders could be a little bit live here against a Broncos team who might just be sitting fat and happy after, some of the success that they had leading into the bye, right? We always do the thing. If you're playing really well coming into the bye week, or you're having a ton of success, now you got that bye week kind of jamming things up, you get right back up for the following week? Or does things kind of turn and maybe you have to kind of work the way back up the mountain a little bit? And so that might be the spot here when it comes to the Broncos, where it's like, I don't know. I don't know if you're playing that great to begin with.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough one here. I'm still going to ride with Bo Nix and see how buttoned up Sean Payton can be here after his bye week. Old man Sean Payton. One more game here before we wrap up. We got the Giants and the Patriots on Monday Night Football. The Patriots at home laying 7 points. I'm on the 7 points. Give me the 7 points with the Giants and Jameis Winston. What a performance last week for Jameis, doing a little bit of everything. That trick play was great. Not only did Jameis catch the ball, but then shook a guy, spun off him into the end zone. He's dancing right into the camera perfectly. Like, it looked like a perfectly choreographed, like, Disney movie celebration. That's how, like, just on beat Jameis was there. So exciting. But the main reason I'm taking the Giants here, just because Jameis at least pushes the ball, right? He pushes it downfield. He tries to make plays. They try to put points on the board. And even if they don't win, I think Jameis can cover a touchdown here against a Patriots team that, obviously, I've been riding with the Patriots all season long, taking them even in spots where I probably shouldn't. But I think 7 points is just a little too much here.
Yeah. What's your take if it's Jackson Dart? Because he's questionable. It's Monday, right? I mean, we're talking about this on Wednesday. I'm certainly playing my, like, it's a Monday night game and it's Wednesday card, and you can get my opinion about this free over at Yahoo.
So we don't have to have an answer right now, but I'll say this: I'd much prefer Jameis than Jackson Dart.
Well, but the reason that I sort of bring it up in that sort of way is because we saw what happened to the point spread when Dart was out and then Jameis was in, and it, like, went negatively towards, away from Jameis, right? It went from 10.5 to 13 and kind of ticked back to like 12.5 or whatever, right? But like, you're talking about it in the same way that I kind of would be as well, in that it's like, wait, why is there a difference between Jackson Dart and Jameis? Like, there's a difference macro, right? You want to play Dart because he's the future. But when it comes to actually playing football out there, especially the way that Jameis has played, which has been, again, pretty, like, as we've said a trillion times, there's buttons everywhere, but at least they're all up. Like, he's been playing sort of like the best version, if you will, of Jameis, such as that is.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that there is a difference, right? And so that's what's kind of interesting to me, where it's like, if Dart gets announced as out, are we going to see the 7.5s that actually this line opened as?
Yes, I got you.
Because we're not talking a 3-point change or a 2-point change or whatever, but even just a half point, 7 to 7.5, I think makes a pretty significant difference. And especially if we like Jameis potentially better than Dart, right? So you're getting that combination of like, I like Jameis better, and I'm getting the half point. Like, that is really more interesting to me, a Jameis plus 7.5 versus a Dart plus 7.
Yeah.
You have to talk about some Patriots here as well, right? Offensive line, mega banged up. Will Campbell out and potentially out for a little while here. Yep. That's going to be somewhat problematic against the Giants' defensive line. Patriots' run game has been all over the map this season. How much of that do you trust? Especially, I kind of felt like they were one injury, a Ramondre Stevenson injury away from being a good running team if they could just give the ball to Travion Henderson a lot more. Now Ramondre's back. He's taking carries away from Henderson. It's all kind of a bit of a mess there. And again, you've got Jared Wilson, their left guard, is doubtful. I mentioned Will Campbell, right? The first, I believe it was a first-round pick last year at left tackle. So you've got a gentleman by the name of Vidarian Lowe. I've never heard of first name Vidarian. That's a new one for me. So you're looking at an offensive line that has potentially 2 guys out against, again, a pretty good defensive line with the Giants. So, maybe it doesn't matter who the quarterback is, and we want the Giants no matter what, but it was worth sort of mentioning that the market downgraded the Giants because of Winston, when maybe for 1 week or 2 or 3 weeks, maybe he's an upgrade.
Yeah, super interesting stuff there. And as you mentioned, though, there's going to be a lot of time between Wednesday and Monday for us to discuss and see some line movement here. So where can the people find you, where you will be updating said game and all the other football on the sched this weekend?
Absolutely. First and foremost, the mega Thanksgiving, the Windows Thanksgiving Football Spectacular over at the Window, over at Substack. So type in the Window sports betting, Matt Russell sports betting, go to any of the sort of sports lists. I'm pretty sure I'm on those. But yeah, and so it's 1 million games. Well, I shouldn't say 1 million games, 4 games, 1 million bets for those 4 games. And then later on the week, we'll get back to our Sunday best and our Monday Night Football preview, which is free over at Yahoo Sports. I know there's a lot going on there. So again, you can follow over on Twitter at MRussAuthentic. And then we'd be remiss if we didn't also mention college football this weekend. Unbelievable sort of one after the other games, starting with the Egg Bowl on Friday. I have a bet already out there over on Yahoo Sports for some of those big games, Egg Bowl, all the way through to the Iron Bowl on Saturday night. A lot of teams who are currently in college football playoff ranking place who have to go on the road against their rival, Mississippi at Mississippi State, Alabama at Auburn. You can throw in an Oregon and Washington, and of course the big one, Michigan hosting Ohio State. Got opinions of all of those for betting purposes. Again, Matt Russell, the Window, sports betting, any of those should work over on Substack.com and the Substack app.
We are at that time of year where there's football all the time, high stakes football all the time, and it'll be a great way to watch and enjoy while you get down to some Thanksgiving fixins as well. One of my favorite football weeks of the year is about to kick off. Hopefully
happy Thanksgiving, you everybody.
Yes, happy Thanksgiving. Hopefully everyone enjoys that. And of course, you can find me online at Shell Alexander on Twitter, at Sheldon Alexander on Instagram. Of course, the podcast. Like, follow, and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Let us know what you think. Where are you laying your picks this week? All that other fun stuff. We got so much going on. Thank you for tuning in. As I always say, I used to pray for times like this to rhyme like this. This is Clutch Picks Betting Podcast. As always, unpolished and unapologetic. Until next time, see ya.